Dak Prescott had an absurdly good season this year, as he was second in expected points added, which if you don't know what that stat is, I have a video that breaks it down. It's awesome because it's useful in defining how well a quarterback, offense, and defense is playing, so it's very versatile. In addition to being second in EPA, Dak was uber consistent, being second in quarterback rating as well. His supporting cast, which is based on the PFF grades of his receivers and pass blocking, was ranked number 4. So in all, he ranked as my 4th best quarterback in the entire league. He was really on one this year. I know he looked disappointing in the playoff game against Green Bay, but holistically, he had a fantastic season, and if he can repeat that, Dallas is going to be so difficult to beat this year. At backup quarterback, Cooper Rush is an alright backup, and Trey Lance has very high upside, as evident by him being drafted 3rd overall in 2021. So they do have some stuff going for them. If Dak were to go down, which hopefully doesn't happen, but they are pretty well insulated if he does miss any time. As we move to the supporting cast, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you give it a like, and also subscribe, as both make massive differences. With that out of the way though, the offensive line for Dallas is alright. It has the potential to be good, but it also has the potential to be a weakness, so I'm kind of just in the middle with it. This past season, they were 15th in pass blocking and 8th in run blocking when combining ESPN's pass blocking and run blocking win rates with PFF's grades for those aspects. So they were pretty darn good. But there's a ton of turnover with them this year, and that's why it's so hard to project what they're going to be. Compared to last year, they likely will be a little bit worse, as they lost an elite tackle in Tyron Smith, who was actually healthy for them, and he played at an elite level this year. They also lost Tyler Biadasz, who was a solid center. To replace Smith, they drafted Tyler Guyton in the 1st, who is an extremely raw and athletic tackle with a ton of potential. Historically, since 2019, first-round tackles average a 64 grade, which would be good for 53rd out of 89 tackles. But due to Guyton being so raw, it will likely be lower for him. But again, there is that chance that he actually is even better than that, because he has the potential to be super elite. And they have a great offensive line coach in Dallas, so that will be something that will hopefully help his progression. Brock Hoffman, likewise, will be probably a downgrade from Tyler Biadasz, as Hoffman didn't play much, but earned a 54 PFF grade when he did play, and Biadasz earned a nice 69 grade. Overall, their depth is actually pretty good though, as TJ Bass is a solid interior option, as is Cooper Beebe, who was drafted in the 3rd. Since 2019, the average 3rd round interior offensive lineman has an alright 52 PFF grade, so he should be roughly as good as Brock Hoffman, though Beebe is more of a long-term option, so he might be the starter, and he might perform better, he might perform worse. Lastly, Chuma Edoga is a solid swing tackle, so they're pretty well covered if anybody misses time. So that is one good thing they have going for them, is they should be a pretty consistent line regardless of who's in or out. Regarding their weapons, they're rather good, though they do definitely lack some depth. CeeDee Lamb is an elite option, as he was 3rd in yards per game and 38th in yards per reception, which perfectly illustrates the type of player he is. He is a chain mover, and he is an absolute beast in the short to intermediate part of the game. He does have some proficiency winning deep downfield, as being 38th in yards per reception isn't bad by any stretch. but he is more of the traditional slot that does their work in the short parts of the field. So he is a very good option to have. Just as a side note, he is a fantastic point per reception fantasy player because he does just catch basically everything thrown his way, and he does do a good job of turning short gains into longer ones as well because he does have good run after the catch ability. So overall, he's one of the absolute best in the league. I would say he is the best slot receiver, or primary slot receiver in the league. I like him a little bit more than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think he is better than Puka Nacua at this point in their careers. So I think he is the best slot receiver. Things fall off pretty quickly, though. Brandon Cooks is a solid number 2, but not fantastic. He was 66th in yards per game and 51st in yards per reception. He still does have some juice to win deep downfield, but he's also more of a reliable intermediate target than he is a true deep downfield threat. So they play pretty nicely off each other, but it would be nice if Cooks had a little bit more juice to him. If he was a little bit younger, I think things would be a little bit more nice to play off each other. As their third option, Jalen Tolbert was alright. He was the 4th option this past season behind Gallup as well, and thereby he ranked 172nd in yards per game and 49th in yards per reception. So that yards per game looks really rough. There's 32 teams, obviously, and 4 receivers. So you're looking at about 130 for being the 4th option, not including tight ends, which obviously they do matter, but just for wide receivers alone, he was well below average for a 4th receiver, I would say. But he does have a ton of potential. He was drafted with the thought of being a possible long-term option, obviously. And that 49th in yards per reception does show some promise. If he can do that again, that'll help open the field up for Lamb and Cooks. If he can improve upon that, obviously that'll be even better. At tight end, Jake Ferguson is a very reliable tight end. He was 10th in yards per game among tight ends and 8th in yards per reception among tight ends. So he's a very good option. He's a very under-the-radar tight end as well. I don't hear him talked about with even like the good tight ends of the NFL oftentimes. And he put up elite numbers, roughly. So he's very good. He should be talked about more. At running back, I'm not a huge fan of what they have, which isn't really much of a hot take. I think most people aren't. Zeke is an alright option. He was 40th out of 59 halfbacks in PFF grade. So he's alright, but he's not really going to help too much. He's just whatever. Depth-wise, Rico Dowdle is a solid option at running back, but that's about all they have. They don't really have a reliable receiving option as depth, nor do they have a good tight end option. So they're kind of limited in their depth, and they also don't really have much beyond Lamb as far as consistent talent. Lamb and Ferguson, that is. So they need to stay healthy in their weapons department if they want to be good. Shifting to their defense now, the Cowboys are again very top-heavy, which isn't great for defensive backs because you're only as good as your weakest link is there, and they do definitely have a weak link. To start off, though, they have Deron Bland, who ranked 2nd out of 127 corners in PFF grade. He was amazing in coverage and super opportunistic with his interceptions. He did have a bunch of pick sixes. I think he had the most pick sixes in NFL history for a season. And to top it all off, he's a great run defender as well, which isn't the biggest deal, but it's obviously nice to have as a benefit as well. He came out of nowhere, kind of. He wasn't really highly regarded coming into this season, but I think he's here to stay. So he is a very good cornerback number 1. And they have a great cornerback number 2 as well with Trayvon Diggs, who was graded 42nd by PFF in 2022 when he last played most of the year. Like Bland, he creates a lot of interceptions, but unlike Bland, Diggs isn't the greatest in coverage as he sells out to go for interceptions a good deal of the time, which can lead to him being a sneaky pick artist, but it can also lead to him just getting flat out burned. So he's all over the place. He's great and awful in the same game sometimes, but he's very opportunistic, and he can really turn the tide of an entire game with one play. He isn't quite the run defender that Bland is, but he isn't bad in that regard. Together, the Cowboys have an elite 6-foot-plus duo on the outside, so they are really nicely set. They have some tall corners, which is the ideal mold. And on the inside, things aren't quite as good. In fact, they're really rough. Jordan Lewis was ranked 115th out of all cornerbacks this year, despite being graded as the best run-defending cornerback in PFF grade, which really goes to show you just how poor he is in coverage. His last full season before this year was 2021, where he was 67th. So he can be better, a lot better in fact. But this year was a bit worrisome, and I'm not sure what to think of him as a whole. I'm kind of low on him, just because the last thing we saw from him was really rough. At safety, they are very well set. Malik Hooker ranked 14th out of 95 safeties in PFF grade. He gets it done in coverage and in the run game, which is nice to see because when he started out his career, he was basically just a ball hawk and wasn't very good in run defense. But now he's proficient in both regards. Somewhat similarly, Donovan Wilson was graded 53rd according to PFF. He is also capable in coverage and against the run, with a greater leaning towards coverage despite playing roughly 300 snaps in both the box and at free safety. But again, he's not weak in either aspect of the game, which is great. Regarding their defensive back depth, they have Marquise Bell, who is an elite third safety. He can actually challenge for a starting spot this year, I would say, as he ranked 18th out of all safeties per PFF. After him, they don't have anyone that you should feel super confident in, so they do lack that depth again, but they do have some really high-end talent, and they do have a third safety, which is more than a lot of teams can say. Moving forward, on the defensive line, Dallas is about as good as you'll get in the NFL. Despite playing 100 less pressure situations than the next highest edge rusher, Aiden Hutchinson, Micah Parsons finished first out of 122 in edge pressures. He's also really good, or rather good, I should say, as a run defender. So there's no weaknesses in his game. He is an absolute beast and is already maybe the best edge rusher in the league, which is insane because he was initially drafted as an off-ball linebacker and has just made the transition to edge rusher completely seamlessly, seemingly. He bullies offensive tackles like he bullied his peers in college, which is saying a lot because he was kind of a menace. Moving to the other edge, DeMarcus Lawrence ranked 37th for edge pressures. Lawrence is as good as any edge rusher in establishing the edge in the run game, so he's super valuable in both aspects of the game. He's a premier edge 2 as an edge rusher, and he's a bona fide edge 1 in establishing the edge. So he is great. For the inside, Dallas isn't quite up to par, but they have some very good talent still. Osa Odigizua, one of the cooler names in the NFL, was 21st out of 142 in defensive interior pressures. As is becoming a theme with their defensive line, he's also good as a run defender as well, so that's nice. As for their depth on the defensive line, they have a fair bit of it. Their defensive tackle, too, is likely going to be Mozzie Smith, first of all. He was really rough in his rookie year. He was kind of in between positions as he was told to lose weight, and that kind of messed with him, I think. But either way, he didn't have a good season. He was drafted very highly. He was a bona fide first-round pick, and that keeps me still being a little bit optimistic about him, but he really was rough. He was one of the worst run-defending defensive tackles in the entire league, and that was one thing he was supposed to be good at. Moving to their depth now, though, Chauncey Golston is a solid edge 3. He was 63rd in edge pressures. Unlike the rest of the line, he's very poor against the run, but he has some solid juice as a pass rusher in his limited snaps, so he's a great rotational guy. Sam Williams was 86th in edge pressures despite being edge rusher 5 for Dallas behind the aforementioned players and Dante Fowler. So he should be even more highly ranked this year as he moves up on the depth chart some. Then they do have Marshawn Nealand, who was drafted in the second as another edge rusher. Second round edge rushing rookies since 2019 averages 62 PFF grade, which would be good for a ranking of 82 out of 142. So he could be a solid rotational edge as well. Lastly, for the interior, Linval Joseph and Jordan Phillips were recently brought in, but I don't think either are much of anything at this point in their careers, so I'm not really optimistic about them. I am higher on Joseph than I am Phillips because Phillips is just terrible as a run defender. He has some proficiency as a pass rusher, but I think Joseph is more of a consistent player than Phillips is, so I'd be more optimistic about Joseph than I am Phillips. For the final positional group, the linebacking core, the Cowboys are pretty good. Eric Kendricks was a fantastic addition. They really needed a linebacker, and Kendricks is a really solid linebacker at this point in his career still. He ranked 25th out of 82 linebackers in PFF grade, getting it done in run defense and pass coverage, and being a star blitzer as well. So he is a really nice find in every way. And Damone Clark was 54th in PFF grade. He specializes in coverage and not much else, but that's a very valuable thing to be good at. So they pair nicely with each other. The depth at linebacker is alright, as Marist Liufau. I'm totally botching that. I'm sorry for that. I tried my best, but it was not good enough, clearly. He was drafted in the third, either way, to be their third linebacker. Since 2019, rookie third-round pick linebackers average a poor 51 PFF grade, which would be good for 83 out of 89 linebackers that played 20% or more of snaps this year. So he shouldn't be expected to contribute much year one, but he could be something down the line. In all, Dallas is an elite Super Bowl contending team. Dak might not be elite all the time, but he's shown he can be an elite quarterback this past season. His offensive line is likely not going to be as good, but it should be good enough. And then his receiving options are actually quite good, particularly at the top with CeeDee Lamb as his lead guy and Jake Ferguson being a solid tight end option as well. Moving to their defense, their outside cornerbacks are very good, so if they can get anything out of Jordan Lewis on the inside, they'll be super well set, especially with how good their safeties are. Additionally, their defensive line is incredible and it's deep, so they can rotate guys in and be protected from injuries. Linebacker-wise, they're really solid too. Those are my thoughts. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more content.